And now to bring forth that great message this morning for all of us to hear that Father Yahweh has inspired, the great Kahan, Benaiah Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. You all may be seated and buckle up. Buckle up. Put your seatbelts on and listen with a believing mind. Okay, the message is going to be short, but it's the most important message you've probably heard in a long time. Okay, now, today, the message today is how Yahweh is glorified through His servant Yisrayl. And we're going to go through it. We're going to see what came to pass in these last days. It was around like when Yeshua was on the scene, all the things occurred around Galilee and Jerusalem. It was not a big area. It was not a worldwide scene. They didn't have the Roman news media to lift them up. It was handed down to us in a book, okay, called the Book of Yahweh. And today we're going to go through step by step how His servant Israel was, it was prophesied that through His servant Israel, Yahweh will be glorified. Turn over to Yochanan 17, 1-6. And Yeshua, after he had spoken these words, lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, Father, the hour has come, glorify your Son, that your Son may also glorify you. As you have given him power over all flesh, that he may give eternal life to many as you have given him. And this is life eternal, that they know you, the one true Father, and Yeshua Messiah whom you have sent. I have glorified you on the earth. I have finished the work which you gave me to do. And now, Father, glorify me, beside your own self, with the glory which I am to have with you before the world to come. I have manifested, made openly known your name to the men that you gave me out of the world. They were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have kept your law. Okay, now, remember what Joshua did? He had manifested the name of Yahweh. And Israel, in these days, again, has manifested the name of Yahweh with the establishment of the House of Yahweh. And also Yeshua, because his name was taken away. And a false name has been given, and in this false name, they take liberty to sin, okay? In the name of Jesus, of course, they are allowed to sin. He has done away with the law, which is a lie, of course. And that has been straightened out, and we're going to continue to see how Yahweh has glorified the name, all right? The house of Yahweh, it started with the house of Yahweh. Remember, Satan has deceived the whole world. So when the house of Yahweh was established in these last days, she had everything going, if you know how a hurricane works, counterclockwise, to the left. Everything turning around, all right? And there is an eye of the hurricane. And in these last days, there was a prophecy that the house of Yahweh will be established. And right in the eye of the hurricane, He set the house of Yahweh through His servant Israel to turn the clock backwards. Now you see the force which is against us. You get it? Everything is out to kill you, to try to destroy us. But yet the house of Yahweh is growing, because there was a protection promised. Remember, in Isaiah 43, verse 1, it says, and when the waters will come, they will not overflow you. All right? And they didn't. The waters represents people, as we're going to go in and check out who they really are, so you look at them with the eyes of Yahweh. All right? Now they come, the waters, they represent, they come in like a raindrop, one drop at a time. That's how we came trickling into the house of Yahweh. And before you know, there was a whole flood. They came and go. But they could not overflow the house of Yahweh, okay? Now, so remember, so how did she do that? Satan's job now, we're in the eye of the hurricane, the house of Yahweh, and everything against her. She used all her energy and power to stop the work of Yahweh. She has failed, and she will fail again, and we can prove it through the prophecies. Okay, remember in Isaiah, that has come to pass, all right? But Yahweh uses people, all right? Now, there was when the house of Yahweh was established, Satan's used her servants. Remember when the house of Yahweh when the work of Yahweh started with Adam and Eve? Guess who was there? As a guest, Satan. The devil was there too. And she enticed Eve probably to say, you sure Yahweh said you can eat no pork? No, Eve, come on. Look, I found a new recipe. Try that and give it to Adam too. And they did. I don't know, maybe it was just a stinking recipe of eating the pork, but there was probably more involved. That's not the point. So when the house of Yahweh was established, again, there was people coming in, and they helped us start to build the building. It's the press room right now. And, every time a truth came forth, the house of Yahweh was established to reveal the truths, to uncover the truths. And one man, I don't know what his name was, Charlie, Joe, John. I don't point fingers and names. Could be their names, could not be, whatever. It doesn't matter. But anyway, a truth came out about the holy garment, the keeper. And all at once, a little water pebble came out. What? Why do we have to wear the keeper? Whoa. Yeah, why? Well, a message is going to be given about the holy garments. So a rejection was right there, right from the beginning, from a little water pebble raising up, and so Hillel tried to change. So her job was to stop the work, to destroy the house of Yahweh. So how are you going to start? She didn't come right with all full force, as she came later on, as we're going to see. So, the holy garment. Well, we got to wear this keeper, Well, that's too Jewish looking. Well, so next week you're not going to come in if you not wear a keeper. So, and the next week came, there was the 7 Malach standing, a little worm there shaking around next to him there, not knowing what went on there. But anyway, they didn't come in, and lo and behold, the first Kahan, first elder, sided with that man who rejected the holy garment, and they left. So she tried to twist the doctrine a little bit. And then another pebble popped up, said, well, why the holy garment? No, we don't have to wear this talit, or the veil, or the headscarf. No. You see? So they couldn't come in either, all right? You don't want to wear it, stay out. You know why? She tried to contaminate the doctrine. But you cannot fool the 7 Malach. He was trained from the womb to do this work, okay? There was no deception could penetrate. But she could have destroyed the work of Yahweh just allowing Jezebel to put a little false doctrine. And the other man, of course, didn't like the way we baptized into the Greek family name of Yahweh. All right? So, and he didn't want to watch the new moon. I said, well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to? Well, he says, make a circle, put a stick in there, and watch the sun. Oh, that is a little complicated. But anyway, but it didn't succeed, of course not. So Hillel had to start a little bigger. So, well, we cannot deceive them this way. So she started round 1. Okay, I call it round 1 and round 2. Now, in the round 1, of course, the time came when the marriage and slavery was revealed, the truth about it, and that was one of the hated ways. That really stirred her up, and she was angry. And so when that came out, the book came out, I had a dream or a vision in the night. You can, there was a lot of visions and dreams in the night. I didn't understand what it meant. And I saw that vision had a double meaning. I didn't understand. Now I do. And I told Israel, I said, listen, I dreamt about muddy waters, and these muddy waters represent trouble. I don't know where it's going to come from, but we better watch out. Okay, now the dream went like this, I was up on a mountain, and a beautiful mountain. There was trees, green leaves and everything, and a little brook running down there, water. And I see a little bottle swimming down there. I bet you there's a message in there. I'm going to check it. So I tried to reach for it. Well, it slipped away, And by the time I followed it, I came to the bottom, and all at once it disappeared. And I looked. I turned around. The mountain was far behind. And I turned around again, and before me was about 3 feet water and foaming and raging. Wow, I backed off. I said, anybody goes into that water, there's no rescue for them. Well, but the strange thing, there was a boundary. The water didn't come splashing in like it would in a hurricane. So the water had a boundary, and we're going to find out. Now, what was this water? How does Yahweh represent the water? And I would say you should look at this in the same way, with the eyes of Yahweh. Turn over to Yada. In Yada 1 verse 5, those who fall away from the truth. Therefore I will put you in remembrance, though you already know this, that Yahweh, after having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. Okay, and now look in verse 12. These are the spots in your feast of love, the feast of Yahweh. When they feast with you without fear, serving only themselves, they are clouds without water, driven about by the winds, autumn trees without fruit, twice dead, poured out by the roots, raging waves of the sea, foaming up their own shame, wandering stars, to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Here is the sentence already there. You see, this is determined. Now, if you still feel sympathy for those who fall away and then come and bring the persecutors against us, then you're going to get dragged into this muddy water, and believe it or not, you will find no rescue there. Nobody will rescue you out from this. All right, so now you remember these things. These are raging waves of the sea, foaming up their own shame, wandering stars, to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. So what do you want to do with dead meat? They're already dead. There's no repentance for them. You cannot. I tried in the beginning. I tried, and persuade them. Then I found out if there's unbelief, there's nothing you can change. All right? Now, so the persecution came. How did that occur? Okay, someone rose up. Hillel picked somebody up from within, okay, from the inside, which is no big deal for her, okay, because and you would have never guessed who she used. And the whole center point was always the servant Yisrayl. When he built his house, he also, like Solomon, built the house of Yahweh too. Now, somebody rose up from his own family. And then, of course, there was about 10 or 12 kahans or elders. They joined that group, and they were out to destroy the house of Yahweh or take over. Literally, take over the house of Yahweh and change the truth about slavery and marriage. Well, they tried, okay? They tried. And before it was all over, that man was afflicted, the man Israel. I've seen him. I never saw anybody suffer more at that time. Before it was all over, he lost his family, his children, his houses, his land. The only thing was left for him, the house of Yahweh. Hillel could not touch that. That's where I saw the boundary. See, they could not overflow the house and touch the house of Yahweh. And of course, there was a couple of bulldogs, there a couple of jackasses and donkeys. They clung to the chosen branch. And the load was heavy, but, you can go on. A few people can do a lot of work too. All right? So now that was the first round, okay? So what she did know, Hillel, she tried to, but it cost him dearly. Actually, it cost him everything that man worked for. Took care of his children, took care of this woman and everything, and then everything was gone. I think there was a hard bargain to get Hillel to get a clause in the house of Yahweh. Now you would have unbelievers and have believers there, rotten apples. It takes one rotten apple to spoil a whole basket. Okay, no, I don't like the keeper. That would have been a rotten apple. He would have been out there again. You don't have to wear a keeper here, You see, you can have a rotten apple in here. It will spoil the whole rotten potato. So that was round one. Okay, now Hillel saw her, she failed, because that was the water. That's why I saw her. It was straight line and just foaming there. He could not touch. I was between the mountain and the water, I say. And I never understood it until 2 weeks ago. Well, that was one round, okay? So that was pretty ugly, okay? And everyone in the house was suffering for it. You lost so-called friends, and the family split up, just like Yeshua prophesied. And then round two, okay, still the same subject, slavery and marriage. That still was not settled. So this time, of course, Hillel got a little angry, remember? At the same time, you can find that in Revelation 12. And the dragon was enraged with that woman and went to make war with those who fell away, or joined them. They joined together. Remember, that has come to pass. So we couldn't help there. Somehow she had to stop the house of Yahweh. Somehow she had to use all the force, the energy of Satan. It says it will depend on her energy. And she definitely fell into the trap. She tried it with all her might and force. Now, here, of course, there was no big deal again to raise enemies from within, from our own household. Oh, the way that started, I had another vision, of course, a dream. I walked down just before that occurred, down 254 on a beautiful morning. I never walked there. I always drove or somebody drove me there. So I walked, a nice day today. So I walked down the road when I came to the homestead, and to the other side where the milk barn is, I heard a noise from the side, and all at once, water came in maybe about 1.5 feet, 2 feet high, in such a force it came toward the street where I was walking. And then from the north side too, the same thing. It came in so fast, I said, where the hell is this coming from? No clouds, no rain. Okay, well, I can explain now. I didn't understand that. So I said to the Kahan, who is in prison now, I said to him, watch out, there's trouble coming ahead, water. And I said to 7 Malak too, I said, now watch out, I don't know where it will come from, but it did came. Because these waters, what they represented, of course, a trap was set. You know, there was arrest warrants for this man already maybe a year ahead. Okay? But nothing occurred, so they were still fishing in the dark to come, because Hillel joined those who fell away from the house of Yahweh, went there to complain by that man who was specially ordained to persecute the house of Yahweh. Out of his own mouth, he said he will get rid of the problem, or he will destroy the house of Yahweh. That came out of his own intention. He's still in office, so he's still fishing around. He ain't going to catch nothing anymore. But anyway, so she was angry, so she joined. And of course, those who Hillel drew out there, they went in there to the persecutor, and they swore by their God, such and thing is happening in the house of Yahweh. And they believed every rumor and every false allegation. There was nothing but a whole list of anything we've been accused of, from murder to child molestation to everything you can dream of. He had a list like that to accuse us of. This had been accomplished. It had to be that way, because that was the last prophecy what Yeshua spoke concerning what's going to occur. We're going to look into that now. So remember, the dragon was angry, so she joined them with a beastly system. Now when they get a hold of you, remember what occurred when they came against David Koresh? I mean, they burned him out, and then they blamed, oh yeah, he did it himself, he burned himself down there. You know, they got away with it seems like. But their blood, David Koresh's blood, will be on their head. That stain they will not wipe away, because we're going to testify to that. So at least he tried to practice one righteous thing, David Koresh, tried to keep the Passover. So so you know what she could do now, all right? Now once she drags us in this court, and that was her thing. In Hillel's court, she has all the people deceived. You get in there, you got an opportunity like a snowball in hell to come out there without not being guilty, okay? Because they only believed rumors and lies. The truth was not important. That was not important at all, as we have seen with that kangaroo trial. You know, you have the wicked Haman in there and Judge Rabin, all right? And that's all it wrote. But anyway, so the dragon that has been accomplished. And then what occurred, before you know, the arrest warrants came. Now after, now let's hear. See, Yahweh had given a commission to his 7th Malak, okay? And the commission was this. He says, it was in the days, you can look in 10, but in the days of the voice of the 7th Malak, when he begins to sound, the great secret of Yahweh will be finished, as he declared to his servants the prophets. And in verse 11, and he said, you must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and languages and kings. And that's exactly when the preaching started, that when the minute the house of Yahweh was established, that was the job of the 7th Malak. And of course, the nations were angry. They're angry. Remember about the nuclear war? There was interviews made, okay? And the house of Yahweh was made open for all to see when they lifted up the 7. After this nuclear baby didn't come to port, but Yahweh said, you must prophesy to them first. It could not come first. And there another prophecy had to come to pass in Luke 21, 12 to 18. All right, that had to come to pass, and that was the stumbling block that the tribulation could not start. But all things now have been fulfilled. So watch out, you might be in for a long feast. So now the house of Yahweh was opened, made open for all to see in heaven, and the ark or the covenant was seen in it. So when we were lifted up with the seven Malach, after the prophecy of the nuclear doom, which will come too soon for them, okay, so they know that the house of Yahweh is keeping the covenant of Yahweh and proclaiming there was only one covenant, the same covenant I have made with their fathers, I will renew and put the heart and their laws in their hearts and inward part, okay? So this has been fulfilled also, okay, in the past 3.5 years. That all came to pass. And in verse 18, in 11 verse 18 says, and the nations were angry and your judgment has come. They know the house of Yahweh is here to stay. The house of Yahweh cannot remove, nobody can remove a prophecy, not Yahweh's prophecy. Otherwise you have to rewrite the whole history again. Now that is plumb ridiculous. Think like that. They are fools, they do not believe the prophecies. But praise Yahweh. So we see the commission of the seven Malach and see, and of course in Yahweh prophesied it in Isaiah 49. You can read it for yourself. In Isaiah 49. So there's no secret. So Isaiah 49, and look here, it says, and he said, you are my servant, Israel, in verse 3, 49:3. You are my servant, O Israel, through whom I will be glorified. Do you get it? On everything Yahweh has established, just like Yeshua, established the name of Yahweh and established the name of Yeshua again. Remember what we read in Yohanan 17? The same thing. And all these things, while the seven Malach was preaching, the dragon was enraged. They brought us into these courts, and before you know it, Yeshua prophesied, before all this comes, before all these horrible things can come on this earth, let's go and look at that anyway, all right? So we can read it there in Luke 21. And look in verse 12. So he gave all, there will be man's heart failing them for fear, and he talks about the end of the age, what's going to occur. Great earthquakes will be throughout place, famines and pestilence, disease epidemic, and fearful sight and great signs from heaven, all right? But, he says, this was the stumbling block, the prophecy which had to be fulfilled after the prediction of the nuclear baby came, all right? Because they stopped, since that prediction, Yahweh held it back. Remember the boundaries, but in the water, they didn't rise up any, all right? So that showed that Yahweh protected this place. Now, before all this now come, he says, these fearful sights and all these things, they will arrest you and persecute you. Remember, we went through that just not long ago, handing you over to synagogues and prisons. That had to be fulfilled too. We have a Kahan in prison. And they had to be the seven Malach. Before you know, well, the news media had a poll, the Roman media. You know, they couldn't do that in the time when Yeshua and the disciples were on this earth because it was a small region and thing. It was handed down. Now, this time, okay, the house of Yahweh was lifted up for all to see in the heavens, for all to see as a testimony. And now the message what they accuse us of is published and preached for all to see exactly what went on. Like Yeshua said. And you will be brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. Why? The house of Yahweh. You mentioned the house of Yahweh. Well, we were already pre-trialed for 1.5 or 2 years after the Malach and shackled and hand and feet and in his red garments. We have seen the evidence of it, didn't we? This is proof that this has been fulfilled in front of our eyes. But that was the last part before all these fearful things will come on this earth. But this will be your opportunity to witness. Yes, did you see the interview? Have you read it? It is written down. The uncut interview. When they had interviewed the seven Malach, Yahweh said, that's not enough. You will be lifted up the house. And also his servant, Israel, was lifted up right above the house of Yahweh. All right, and that was the trap Hillel didn't see. See, now everyone, and Yeshua said, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then all men will draw to you. Okay, in these last days, they know who the witness is now. There's no more excuse, all right? No more excuse. All right, so, but this will be, that was his opportunity. And they tried to trip him up, Hillel's servants, with a tricky question, and then they cut things and make things, even what he says, look bad, okay? But we have the true, uncut story published unpreached, okay? So there's no, therefore make up your minds not to meditate before what you would say. How would he know what to ask him? Is that true? Is that true, You work the children 40 hours a day, Wow. You have 30 wives? Well, no, I would have said I'm probably going to get more than Solomon. Just wait a little bit, But the book, Marriage and Slavery, it's a book everyone should go into and read it if you want to build a family in the future. All right? So this way you know how to deal with the situations. For I will give you a mouth of wisdom which all your adversaries will not be able to withstand nor contradict. Could they dispute the scripture with him? Of course not. They were not interested in that. They were only interested to point a finger. That's all the whole world heard. But now, at least one thing was accomplished. Yahweh has lifted up his house. His name was glorified through his servant Israel. You get it? There's no two ways about it. And you will be betrayed, both by parents, brothers, relatives, friends, and some of them they will cause for your death. Since the House of Yahweh was established, that man had more death threats than anybody else. They tried to blow us up, blow our brains up and whatever. What occurred? Nothing. Just yapping their jaws off, and you cannot destroy the work of Yahweh. And the job of the 7 Malach is not finished yet. Because if he will be, and he was promised about 100 years in prison just for allegation, nothing proven. We were tried by the media, by the Roman Catholic media, and already found guilty there before even the trial came. Such a thing you never saw. And when the trial came, finally for the Kahan, Hillel had to call Hell's Angels there. The motorcycle gangsters, they were there in their Halloween costumes, hanging around like cockroaches in the courtroom. You can smell them a mile away. For one reason, to intimidate the jury, which they did. So, it didn't surprise me. I say, well, anyway, but Hillel underestimated again. Yahweh's work does not stop in prison. It starts there. There's great prophecies there. It starts there. Nothing will stop. Nowhere. Wherever Yahweh will send us, nothing will stop the message. And we are ready now to deliver this message. This message will be delivered because this time has come. Okay, now remember. And you will be betrayed. Did you see that occurring? And then they tried another thing. They arrested, Hillel destroyed a beautiful ranch there, longing for Zion. They didn't know how close they were to the real Mount Zion. And they destroyed beautiful families. They arrested hundreds and hundreds, all their children. They totally destroyed that ranch. Did you know she tried that in the House of Yahweh too? Some of you probably know the families war. Their children was kidnapped and questioned. Now, so that occurred, and you will be hated of all men for my name's sake. Through your persistence, acquire your life. The 7 Malach has this persistence, all right? And he will save all our lives too. If without for him, we wouldn't be around. Now there's one more thing I got to say, another prophecy, and we can see how that has been fulfilled in Isaiah 10. In Isaiah 10, all right? Here. Now, in verse 23, for Yahweh, Father of hosts, will make a consumption, destruction determined, and in the midst of all the earth. Therefore, this is what Yahweh, Father of hosts, says, O my people who dwell in Zion. He's not talking to that mountain in Israel. This is the true Zion. You know who the true Zion is. Do not be afraid of the Assyrian. He will strike you with the rod and lift up his staff against you after the manner of Egypt. That we have lived through just shortly. But yet, only a very little while, and their indignation will cease, and my judgment will be directed to their destruction. The word indignation means anger aroused by something or someone. Anger was aroused. Why? Because of the truth. That's why the anger was aroused. For something unjust, somebody unjust, unworthy, or mean. And it goes into the insolence. The word insolent means contemptuous, rude, disrespectful, or bold in behavior or language. Did you see that spectacle now for the past 3.5 years? Did they were respectful to the servant of Yahweh? Huh? They behaved rude. They named him everything they could find. All right? But this indignation, I say, has passed over. In Isaiah 26:20, you can read it for yourself. And he says, "Come, my people, enter the sanctuary, and I will shut the doors around you, as it were for a little moment until the indignation is passed over." And there may be just a little strength that has passed over us, and then there may be a long feast waiting for us, maybe 7 months, I don't know. But there's nothing here anymore stopping. All the things have been fulfilled. All the things have been fulfilled, prophesied, what should occur and did occur in these last days, and what the servant of Israel will do, and he has done so. And may Yahweh bless you with this. And now, if you all rise and give honor and glory to whom honor, glory is due, the greatest teacher of peace, the messenger of Yahweh, the seventh Malach, the great Kahan, Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. Praise Yahweh. I love you, all of you. We got a lot to cover. The defilement. Now, during the feast, we're going to have some special information on the defilement of the earth. And it's being worked on now. Information's being gathered. I said, we've got to bring this because it's all over the world. And this year, the wildlife that came in, we have some deer hunters in the house, and some of the deer that was killed, we actually had to discard the whole thing. That's how defiled the earth is. It's not just with the cattle we raise or the sheep or goats. It's everywhere. It's in everything you see now. I don't believe there's a clean animal on the face of the earth, an undefiled animal on the face of the earth. Of course, there's no undefiled humans on the face of the earth either. We're doing our best to clean this up, but I do believe that the change will come before we get it done. And of course, once the change comes, we will have new bodies to work with, and then we will also clean up the earth and get it back to the way it was, the way Yahweh made it. But the food for feast, we've got food that's as clean as it can possibly be at this time, and we've got some very special things for the feast this time for Passover that we've raised ourselves, and we've went out of our way to treat them without drugs, and finding new ways all the time to do so. The information we find in the book of Yahweh is greatly helpful, but right now we have a defiled world all around us, and of course it's in the air. It's being broadcast in the wind. So it's hard to. It would be difficult, impossible. It'd be impossible to clean up a spot on earth and say this spot is kosher. You can raise cattle on it or whatever, and they won't get defiled. It's there's no way you can. The feast, the color has always been plain and clear in the house of Yahweh, black for mourning and white for the righteousness of Yahweh. And of course, this year we're hoping to go orange for the persecution. Praise Yahweh. Wonderful. Now if I can get to some lessons here. I've been working on races for a while because of the fact that the the world wants you to believe that there were races created or they evolved by themselves. They'd rather you believe that the flood didn't wipe out everyone on earth, that there were lands that it didn't touch. These people don't believe the Scripture. They don't even believe the evidence. You know, there's plenty of evidence to show the flood actually covered the earth as Yahweh said it did. The word race itself is a deceptive word, and they've tried to put several meanings to it. It doesn't mean the same as what you find in the Hebrew word. Of course, Yahweh shows us that everyone came from Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve. The genes trace every human being, the DNA. You can actually trace every human being back to Mother Eve. Of course, this has been done. This is an amazing thing that we've discovered in these last days, proving exactly what Yahweh said. The rest of what Yahweh says is true too, that from after the flood, we all came from Noah and his family. And of course, Abraham came from that group. And I want to get deeper into these studies because I know it is a hard subject to understand, but I see it's mostly because of deception that is going on out in the world. But if you'll notice when you read these things, when you are reading something that somebody has put out from the world, they use the words perhaps, or they might have been from this direction or that direction, or they might have come over the mountain or over the Alps, or even use the word sea people. Well, what in the world is sea people? Well, I guess they got in their little boat. But where did they come from before they got in the sea? Was they born in the sea? Is that what they're trying to say? Oh yeah, they came up from some underwater coral here. There's some of these tadpoles that lost their tails and gained lungs. You know, it's so stupid what they get you to believing. But the laws was given through Abel. You've got to remember this. It started with Abel. And of course, that was the first righteous tree, and Cain was the first unrighteous tree, religion. And from those two religions came forth what we see today. They're all just split off from those two. The total righteousness that Yahweh maintained in Israel. He let Satan have the upper hand, but all the time he maintained a house of Yahweh to do the work up until the work was finished, which you're holding in front of you now. Book 2, that was the finishing of the writings, the prophecies and so forth that Yahweh had to have in order for us to understand, because it included Yeshua, the perfect example of his life, and the rejection, of course, of Yeshua. And I've got a lot to bring you before Passover about Yeshua, and hope to finish it during Passover, but I want to start on it maybe next week. And because the prophecies leading up to him, and then the group that Yahweh had in Abel, and that he maintained there, and that group kept bleeding into the like Yochanan, for instance, when he went to Jerusalem and said, it's not right what you're doing here. You're committing adultery with your brother's wife. And he was speaking to a king, when he said this. And of course, that's the reason he was killed. But he came from Abel, from this work that Yahweh maintained in Abel. And of course, Yeshua did too. And the Pharisees, they looked on Abel as the people look on Okies and Arkies today. They looked on them as unlearned and ignorant men. And they said, history says that they accused them of not keeping up with the language, mispronouncing words, which caused a a lot of trouble. Well, it caused them trouble because the Okies and Arkies in Israel were pronouncing these words correctly without vowel points, but they used the Pharisees were using the vowel points as they do today. They still do this today. And, of course, this is what the great Yehuda has been given talent to locate and get straightened out in these last days. And if whether you know it or not, Yahweh has put together a team in His house that is unbeatable. We're not great because we're smart or a different breed or a different race. We're great because Yahweh inspires us, and Yahweh is great, so His greatness comes through, of course, His priest in the governmental system of the House of Yahweh today. And of course, they'll bring you to perfection if you'll let them. If you don't let them, if you swell up like a toad and and resist like a pouty child, sometimes you'll shut yourself off from Yahweh, and then you go downhill from there. The first lesson out of the whole book of Yahweh is to humble yourself, go to the priest, and do what he says, not rebel against it. And you won't get there unless you do. That's a law that must be followed. Then he tells you where the priest is. It wasn't in Jerusalem, as Yeshua told everyone. It's not in Jerusalem. It's not going to be in those mountains anymore. Not going to be in Abel anymore after the work is finished here. Then it's going to be moved to the top nation of all nations in the last days. The scriptures were preserved after Abel. Abel wrote a lot of scriptures for us, and then these were, including the law, and these things were preserved in the ark. And then after the flood settled, and if you remember the great Yehuda's sermon on where the ark actually landed, it landed in Abel. It didn't land. It didn't land on some far off mountain. It was loaded with Yahweh's articles, and it was brought right back to his house, and apparently used for firewood after that for quite some time until things got back in order. But they were taught by Noah and his family. They were learned too. And then they were taught by Abraham, by Melchizedek. They were taught to Abraham by Melchizedek. That's shown us in the Holy Scriptures, and nothing has ever proved that wrong. And Melchizedek they were the same laws that were taught to Moshe then by Jethro. Jethro, the priest of Midian. Well, that's a race, I guess, that come from Jupiter or Mars, or that's what they would like for you to believe, of course. But Jethro was a priest of Midian. Well, what in the world was Midian? And surely this must have been some other kind of religion that he belonged to that was teaching here. The Medians, it says, the history says a race. They start off saying a race. And they want you to believe that it is, that the Medians was a different race of people. And of course, this is where they deceive you, see. But it also admits there are no trustworthy accounts of Midian outside the Bible. It always tickles me when they do this, because it makes my job a lot easier. My job right now in straightening this thing out is getting you to see the deception that's in the world and the truth that's in the Holy Scriptures when Yahweh tells you exactly how it is and how it took place. But this word race, there is the English word for it. It just doesn't fit anything, and it denies itself. It says a breeding stock of animals. I know about breeding, and because I've studied it for years. I studied it first in college, and then I studied it outside because of things that was taking place with the cattle, and I wanted to know how the cattle were being bred, and I used it in dogs, as I was telling you before. But anyone who's ever bred cattle, for instance, the Black Angus, most people know about that. The Hereford was a great breed that come over from Britain. Everything, by the way, was brought here from overseas. The wildlife was brought here. Many of the birds that we have was brought here from somewhere else. The buffalo was brought by some of our ancestors, and no, they weren't foreigners. They were, they were of the tribes. They were probably some that was they could have been mixed with other people that were not of the 12 tribes. It's very, very doubtful, because Yahweh was leading this and set the whole thing up. But there's no way of knowing. This is the thing. And if we say something and say that it was, then we do lie. And because if we have no information, then we're no better than the world when we try to get someone to believe perhaps. The God help will lead you into a lot of lies if you allow him to. But in breeding the Charolais, now they wanted a super stock here, and they wanted it white. And of course, the original cows, as the original people, had different traits. Some of them were black pigments that is in every person. But there's others too. There's other traits besides that just the black and white. But in order to get a white cow, of course, you would find what you wanted. First off, if it was a beef cattle you'd want to go in that direction and find something that had extra meat on the hips. That was the first clue to a beef stock, was the extra meat on the hips, and a lot of other things too. But you wanted that trait in your beef. In order to raise beef. If you wanted a milk cow, you didn't want the extra weight on the hips. You wanted a large bag back there full of milk. So this is the traits that you would pick in breeding. Now, if you wanted a white cow, of course, you would pick the ones that had the white traits, the most of the white traits, which they wouldn't be solid white, but you could take two with a majority of the white traits, breed them together, and it would double. And of course you could do this with the black cow. But most of our stock in America came from the Hereford, which is a red white face with horns. Now, you can also breed them without horns, and that's what many have done. They want what they call a muley cow, a muley stock, where they don't have horns, they don't raise horns, they don't grow horns. And you can do this by taking those traits out, and taking the same way by taking the white or the black traits, whichever one you want. If you want white, then you got to take to get the less colors and go with the ones that have the most white in order to breed this. Well, you get a stock of cattle now. You got to have your bull and your cows here, and they're all white. And of course, the American Cattle Association said, you go to register it, and they say, well, we got to have some records here, and we got to have so many generations of this before you can register it as a breed. Well, that's what the word race should have been translated as a breed, but there again, it would be falsifying the people, because see, it's in everyone. These traits that Yahweh put in Adam and Eve, there are thousands and thousands of them. If you think about it, in all the 6,000 years of mankind, there's never been two people alike. totally alike on the face of the earth. Never been. And this is a scientific fact. You can find lookalikes, but they're all different. And to get all the traits out, they're trying to clone them now to do it, but they're finding now that even in the clones, there are different traits. So if you took clones and they survived, which it's doubtful they would ever survive, because, it's kind of like the banana that somebody raised, and he had this scientific banana where they were all the same size, all the same shape, all the same taste, and they could plant these trees, and they could depend on these bananas, and they could tell them they'll all be just like this, and demand a certain price for them. Well, one disease wiped out the whole thing because they didn't have traits. They didn't have the traits that Yahweh put in them where they would survive something like this. And what struck one would not strike another. Well, that's the way it is with humans too. Not everyone dies of the Black Plague because there were traits that kept them from it. And of course, he gave this mostly to his people. You'd be surprised how many people from the other families other than the 12 tribes disappeared with the Black Plague when that hit the world. There was many, but not very many, they said. History backs me up in this. Not very many of the 12 tribes died because they had certain things to protect them, and Yahweh put that in there for his house today because he had a plan for his house. Well, back to the cattle now. You got a breed of cattle here that you think is okay. Well, the Cattle Association said, yes, we'll register it, but you got to keep records on it for so many generations, and there can't be, you've got to maintain this breeding program now, and don't let anything occur to it. And if you can keep the records with the pictures and so forth, we'll classify it as a breed. Now, you get the breed. You still don't have the perfect setup for Charolais cattle, because Charolais cattle crop back. And every once in a while, you'll see one of another color come, which means they still got the traits. So you quickly get rid of that because you don't want anyone to see it. And of course, these are registered cattle. So is the beef master. A lot of cattle, the ranchers have gone to extremes to get what they wanted in beef. But they suffer a lot of setbacks, like the cow, the one I just mentioned, the beef master. It has a lot of trouble surviving. There's another breed that I've forgotten the name of it, but you have to have it by cesarean birth because they can't have their babies. So you take some of these traits out trying to get what you want, and you make it weaker than it was supposed to be. That's what Hitler did in Germany. And you need some facts in mind with Hitler. You know, if you think the German people was a separate race, Hitler was a German. I mean, he was a German, yeah. He was also a Jew. His mother was German, but she was also Jewish. His daddy was German, but he was also Jewish. Now, this should tell you something about Germany, but I'll bring more. I'll bring you more about Italy, too. There's no such thing, and biology will tell you this. There is no such thing as an Italian race. It's a mixture. Well, that's what we have in the world today, is this mixture all over. And as Yahweh said, I've made the races one. They're back to the same mixture. And everyone that's black has white pigments. They have all the traits that the other people have. Maybe some have more than others, like Yahweh created them to be. But anyway, the animals, like humans, you know, they will crop out with other things, and you'll see those traits coming out in the looks and the face and the body, the size, the shape, how tall you are, how short you are, what color your hair is, and so forth. And Hitler wanted a blonde-haired, blue-eyed race. That's what he wanted, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed race. Hitler was so stupid in what he was trying to do, he chose the poorest traits you can get for the people. And as biology will tell you, blonde hair is the weakest hair. Blue eyes are the weakest eyes. Now, that don't mean you'll go blind if you have that, but those are the weakest among the human beings. Those are the weakest colors, the weakest eyes. If you have blue eyes, your eyes are weak. Weaker than brown eyes, weaker than black eyes. I believe the brown eyes are that's what I have, so. But that don't mean I would throw brown-eyed children all the time, because I have other traits. And I have an uncle, for instance, that had hazel eyes. My grandfather was red-headed. When I was a child, I was red-headed. I don't know what this color is now that I got, but I was sandy red, and then I turned cotton blonde, and then a brownish, and then got aggravated and dyed my hair black one time, and I didn't like that. But in the race now, belonging to the same stock. So, see, that doesn't really spell anything, because you can belong to the same stock and still be different as everybody is. So it doesn't see, it's still alive the way they use it in this word. A class or kind of people unified. There's not two people on the face of the earth that are unified. No way. Everybody is different. See if you find any unity here, any unified people between the people sitting in this room. Everybody is different, and always has been. And actually or potentially interbreeding group within a species. Well, you start interbreeding, and you'll have your children out there barking at the moon in a little while. Because it alters when you interbreed. You can do it for a little while. Try it on dogs, don't try it on humans. But there have been people that went off to themselves, and they had no visitors, and they disappeared from the face of the earth. They bred themselves out of existence because they ruined what Yahweh set up to begin with, to make all people one and keep them in that manner. Otherwise, they'd be unequal. And of course, Yahweh is not, He made everyone equal, and everyone has the same opportunities. So when a person takes a breed of people off, or a group of people off into a certain place and tries to hibernate, those people go down. They don't come up. And they start intermingling. We saw that a lot in the South when the people were having trouble, and they started marrying their brothers and sisters, and as some said, they even permitted marrying the mother, and it goes downhill. You get the brain starts going downhill. And if you do this in dogs, well, you'll see crazy dogs start coming, from your puppies, and they'll be so crazy that you'll have to get rid of them. But the word breed, that doesn't fit the definition for race, even though they got it in here as being part of the definition. A division of mankind possessing traits. Now, here's the most suitable one for it, but this is off too. But the division of mankind possessing traits that are transmittable by descent and significant to characterize it as a distinct human type. But see, they get off there at the end. You can't classify any human as being a distinct human type. He's different from other people, Yes, everybody is different, but you breed him to someone else and you got different people. So, it's something that can't be kept straight at all from one human to the next. Well, let's go over to and get back to the word median now. That should be enough on race, I would think, and breeding. You should understand this. And no, we didn't get bred to angels that we don't cross. and the plan was for the Son of Man, not the Son of Angels. To which of the Malachim did he say this? To none of them. It's only to the Son of Man. Keep that straight now and believe it, because if you don't, you will never understand the plan of Yahweh. Let's go over to get with medium now. Let's be turning over to Genesis 25, because median appears in connection with Abraham. Abraham, Yosef, Moshe. It also appears with Balaam. So it's not necessarily righteous or evil, so that, they can be pulled either way, like you can. You can be pulled either way if you let yourself go that way. What Yahweh tells you to do, of course, is to get this mindset on what He says, believe it, and follow it, and trust in it, and then you won't be getting mixed up, and you'll make it into the kingdom. Because He does offer salvation, but it's only to those who will believe and follow strictly those ways. And if you don't believe, and you don't believe the one sent, there's really no use of you being here. Unless you want to convert and because you'll never make it if you don't believe the one sent. That's a must. Yahweh says, I'm going to destroy those who don't believe. Praise Yahweh. Well, here now in Genesis 25, we see medium. Abraham took another wife, and her name was Keturah. And she bore him Zimron, Yokshan, Midian, and Midian. Now, she actually had 6 sons here for Abraham. Now, each one of those was of the lineage of Abraham. Do you get that? Now, there's a difference now in that in Isaac, because the promise was to the son by Sarah. So there's a difference in this, but these are of the same lineage. They are of the lineage of Abraham. So he had 6 sons here that lived and multiplied, I suppose. Midian is the 4th son of Abraham and Keturah. Now that is a scriptural fact. The 4th son. In the early life of Moshe, let's go back, let's go over there to the early life of Moshe in Exodus, the 2nd chapter, Exodus 2, because we see now a priest of Midian, Now we know that there were priests. We know from this right here that they were priests, because this is a priest, not the priest, but a priest of Midian. So that means there was more then. If you look back to verse 15, you see a land of Midian. Doesn't say what size. I remember a land of Yisrayl Hawkins when he first came to Abelin, and he rented a lot that was 50 by 80, I believe it was. That was the land of Yisrayl Hawkins that Yahweh gave me. Later on, he gave us 10.5 acres on 10P Lane, and that was the land of. They called it the land of Yahweh. The newspaper did. I think that's what the land of Yahweh, and we put a sign up there, land of Yahweh. Somebody did. I think it was Kohan Benaiah. Put the sign up and painted the land of Yahweh. But this is the land of Midian. And he says in verse 15, talking about Pharaoh, of course, and Moshe, whom Yahweh was calling. And I want everyone to read this story for yourself this afternoon, because it's painted in your mind, and a lot of people have this, and this is how the Charleston Heston movie started, was they portrayed this very thing, was that this Egyptian character had a whip in his hand. He was a slave driver, and he was out there picking on the Hebrews. No, that wasn't the case. In fact, it was a Hebrew and an Egyptian, and they were having a fight. They were fighting each other, and apparently the Egyptian was beating up on the Hebrew pretty bad, and Moshe, there was nobody else around. This wasn't a work camp. If it had been a work camp, there'd have been somebody else around, wouldn't there not? But he looked this way, that way. He couldn't see anyone, so he killed the Egyptian. He thought no one was watching him, and he killed the Egyptian. Well, that was the story ahead of this now, if you remember. And then in verse 15, when Pharaoh heard of this matter, he tried to kill Moshe. Pharaoh did. That is, he sent the command out to kill Moshe. But Moshe fled from Pharaoh and went to the land of Midian, and he sat down by the well. Now, a priest of Midian here had 7 daughters. They came and they to the well and drew water, filling their thoughts to water their father's flock. But some shepherds came along and drove them away. Then Moshe stood up and rescued them, and he watered their flock. When they returned to Reuel, here's another one now, that a strange name, Reuel their father. This wasn't Jethro, but Reuel their father. When they returned to him, Reuel their father, he asked them, "How is it that you have returned?" Let me see if I have. Another thing that race means is religion in the Hebrew word. And of course, that fits much better. Okay, they went to their father, Reuel, and then verse 19, and they answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherd. Then he also drew water for us and watered our flock." So he asked his daughters, "And where is he? Why is it you have left the man? Invite him, and that he may eat bread." He said, then Moshe agreed to stay with the man, and he gave him Zipporah, his daughter, to Moshe in marriage. Moshe in marriage. Look on down to let's read verse 22. "And she bore him a son, and he called his name Gershom, stranger. Therefore he said, I have become a stranger in a foreign land." Look on down to chapter 3 now. Chapter 3, and we see the word priest of Midian again. "Now Moshe was tending the flock of Jethro, and his excellency, his relation by law, a priest of Midian." Priest of Midian. Remember now, this is the the fourth named of the 6 sons of Abraham by Keturah. So he was a priest of Midian, which means this kind of sets the record here, is showing that Abraham taught the laws, and of course Jethro was one of them that learned. Then he says, priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb. This Horeb, they're still hunting Horeb, but haven't found it yet. But this word Horeb here, it's in several scriptures. He says, Now, here's what they try to get you to believe here. It says, in the opinion of some. Now, this is the words they use, in the opinion of some. Well, what would that tell you now? But somebody is guessing something and they don't know. So they're giving you a guess, hoping you will believe it. And a little further down, they said, but according to others, they give you another opinion. But let's take this and run with it here. Let's look back to Exodus 3:1 there and get that in your mind. Then let's go over to Exodus 17 and verse 6. He said, behold, I will stand there before you. I know you remember this. I will stand there before you upon the rock at Horeb. This is Yahweh after he brought the children of Israel out of Egypt and was showing them miracles. And you got to get this in your mind. He was showing what his power, what he could do easily, as Yahshua with just a command, and the earth would obey him. The rocks of the earth would obey him. The rocks, because he's dealing with a rock here. This is Exodus 3:1. Now Moshe was tending the flock of Jethro, that is, His Excellency, his relation by law, a priest of Yahweh, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to separate and purify himself with the ashes of the red heifer at Abel. This is all in this scripture here. And why they would leave this out, I don't know. Every authoritative book says this. At Abel, the ashes of the red heifer at Abel, where the house of Yahweh was. So here we know now that, praise Yahweh, that it wasn't just any priest. It was a priest, yes, but it was a priest of the house of Yahweh. Now, back over here at chapter 17, we see Horeb again, and this rock at Horeb, and I will stand there before you upon the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and the water shall come out of it for the people to drink. So Moshe did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. The elders. This elders, it means prince. It means priest. It's someone in high authority as being able to teach. Let's go to Deuteronomy now, 1 and 2. Deuteronomy 1 and 2. Chapter 1, verse 2. And he says, it is 11 days' journey from Horeb by way of Mount Seirah to Kadesh Barnea. This Kadesh Barnea, it's a consecrated place, set apart, more fully a spot to worship. It also means sanctuary. It's a fountain of judgment. Now, it was called fountain of judgment for the reason that when Yahweh, after showing, if you read all the miracles and you didn't believe them, you would stand in probably 90% or 99% of the children of Israel that Yahweh brought out of Egypt. You would stand in their shoes right now. If you read it and didn't believe it, if you didn't read it or didn't study it, actually, because you've got to study these things to find out what really occurred, but they simply didn't believe. And of course, he showed what he could do. He killed their enemies, he drove them out. Most of the time, Israel did not even have to fight. Yahweh could have had this to where they wouldn't have to fight if he had so desired. And he did in many cases, and one with Abraham, because Abraham never killed anyone. None of his crew, it's nothing that shows in the scripture that he killed anyone. In fact, they were running from him so fast, they were so scared, they left all their things behind, everything they took, including the people, and they ran and they ran into pits and killed themselves. And Abraham didn't even have to touch them. But that's how Yahweh showed what He could do if you trust in Him. Drying up the sea overnight. How in the world could a person do this without having control of the water, which is alive, of course? We know that more and more now, that the water is alive. It's also alive with parasites now. That's some of the things we're fighting, because they're in the water too. We do have at our disposal some purified wells that have been, Yahweh has set aside for us, and water that, He has blessed us with that is clean. But up on top, it's a different matter. Well, this is a place of judgment, fountain of judgment. If you remember, let me tell you this, and we won't have to look up all the scriptures, but if you remember, Yahweh says it's time to go, and time to possess the land. So they sent out spies to the land of Canaan. The spies came back and said, these people are giants. They're a different race. They're from Pluto. They had the same lie put in their minds that people do today. There's something different about those people, Yeah, there's talk difference. But they said, these are giants, There's no way that we could ever take control of these people. And so Yahweh says, have they totally forgot all that I've done for them? Why on earth are they doing this? And at that time, the sentence of judgment was passed right here on them. They were sentenced to 40 years in the wilderness there because they wouldn't believe Yahweh. So He sentenced them. That was why they called this the place of judgment, because it was a sanctuary. And water flowed from a rock just from speaking. And that was one of the last things that Yahweh did, but they still wouldn't believe. And then they give this report. They weren't sent there to find out how tough the people were. They were sent there to discover what routes to take for the children of Israel to come in and possess the land. There was no problem with possessing the land. Yahweh would have taken this people without ever touching one with a sword or a bow or anything. That's how He showed His power to Israel all this time, from the coming out or before the coming out of Egypt until now. And the last thing He shows them is water coming from a rock. And then the spies come back and says, there ain't no way we can do this. Forget it. Let's go back to Egypt. And of course, Yahweh said, turn and go the other way. Just forget about taking the land right now. Just turn and go the other way. So they said, oh, no. Let's bolster up our spirits here. And they had some psychologists, I guess, come in and oh, yeah, man, we can take them, Look at the muscles on this man. Well, that's what they were looking at. And Moshe said, no, don't go. Don't go in and try to do this. They will kill you, which they did. And the ones that came running back, Yahweh took them, and He led them 40 more years in the wilderness. That's the reason, it's almost a laugh for anyone that knows the Scriptures. It was 11 days' journey from there to this land, but it took them 40 years to get there. 11 days. Well, that was the judgment that took place. Let's go back to Deuteronomy. And this word now, it means place of judgment because of that very thing. Israel determined to obtain possession by themselves, and Yahweh told them not to. So, of course, they suffered for it. Look on down to verse 19. So we set out from Horeb, as Yahweh had commanded us, and went through all the great and terrible wilderness, and saw on the way the mountains of the Amorites, and we came to Kadesh Barnea. And let's see, let's go back to, let me see where to go to next. 1 to 19. Let's go to 1 Kings because, and follow this thing out. 1 Kings 8 and verse 9. Now here's where we get into after Israel says we want a king and we want a king to reign over us so we can be like all the other nations. And so they rejected Yahweh here. And here is this was the lesson, of course, that Yahweh permitted. Remember, this is the plan of Yahweh. That was His plan, and nothing occurred that wasn't actually planned out, that He would make the judgment, and it went exactly as He made the judgment. Well, in chapter 8 now of 1 Kings, in verse 9, he says, there was nothing in the ark except the 2 tablets of stone which Moshe had placed there at Horeb. So we know that this Horeb was, as I've just read you, from the house of Yahweh. It was the house of Yahweh where Yahweh worked with Moshe and trained him. That was part of it, where He brought the children of Israel back to. And of course, He trained for more years. Let's look at, let's see, 1 Kings. Well, let's go to 19:8. 1 Kings 19:8. He says, so he got up and ate and drank, and on the strength of that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, the mountain of Yahweh. Now, this is why they keep searching for a mountain. There is no mountains. The mountain is the same idiom that you see in Isaiah, where it's talking about the promotion. It's an uplifting of the house of Yahweh, or a testing of Yahweh's people, as the great Kohan Benaiah just brought out here very simply a while ago to everyone. Let's go to Psalms 106:19. We get this information all the way through the Holy Scriptures, but if you don't understand what it's talking about, then you start wanting to hunt that mountain to go find Yahweh. Well, of course, He's right here at this mountain in these last days. In Psalms now 106 and notice verse 19, he says, there on the mount of Yahweh, or the uplifted place of Yahweh, they made the circular altar of Baal Peor, and right in the front door of the house of Yahweh, with the high place, and bowed down to them. Now, this is where you see the tribes that was separating from Yahweh at this time. Now, this actually took place about 536 BCE right here. About 536. So, it came down to a later date here. And of course, you could see what all was brought into Yahweh's house. And of course, this was what Josiah, we'll get back to him. We got up to him here a few weeks ago. This is what Josiah, he comes out. Jeremiah hands him gives the law to one of his representatives, and of course it was Jeremiah that did this. He took him the law, gave it to his representative. His representative said, we've found this book of the law in the house of Yahweh. You found it? Was it hidden? Did anyone ever look for it? No. Jeremiah said, they didn't ask where is Yahweh. No one asked where is Yahweh. Isaiah said the same thing. They didn't search for my law. It was there all the time. But Jeremiah had to go get it and give it to him. This is why Jeremiah led King Josiah, to destroying all of these things. Baal Peor, that is the Lord, the worship of the Lord, which was a Christmas tree, Easter eggs, Easter bunnies, the Queen of Heaven. One of the things about the race of Germany, I've got to find you that. I've got to find you that right quickly. Because one of the things about saying I'm this or that, it could get you in trouble. The first occupancies of Germany they didn't even find any, don't have no record of it until like 500 BC. Well, of course, when the records they found were tribes. There were tribes that was settled here and there throughout the land. So, to become a German, where you have the rights of what was offered by the king or the emperor. One of the leaders of Germany, we know it was part of the Roman Empire because one of the leaders of Germany, David Yehuda, brought out one time that he was crowned a German emperor. Now, this was Germany, but it was in the early stages of Germany. And it says here that Germany occupied from 500 BC. Well, that's the first records, and it was just merely Germanic tribes. To be Germanic, if I can find that, you must be Teutonic. Here it is. Teutonic. Now, this is one of the ways of being classified as a German, is to be Teutonic. There's other ways of being. One of them is speaking the German language. One of them is being born in Austria or Germany or I think Switzerland, I think. It wasn't just Germany. But if you spoke the German language or a German dialect of some kind, which was a mixed up language from several different tribes, and of course included Austria, which the great Benaiah comes from and can give you some great information on this, in Switzerland, but the Teutonic order, the Teutonic Knights. This was a house of the Hospitalators of St. Mary. And you could be a member of this and you could be German. It's the same thing now that you find with Rome. If you were a Pharisee, you were a Roman citizen because the Pharisees owned Rome. They owned Italy. Italy, history says that Italy says there's no such thing as Italian. It's a mixed up variety of several different tribes that came into Italy. We know they were Romans. We know they were Pharisees. We know they were of the 12 tribes. The Apostle Shaul was one of them. He was a Roman soldier, but he was a Pharisee. He wasn't born in Rome or Italy, but he was a Pharisee, so he was a Roman citizen. And his dad was a Roman citizen. We'll get into that deeper later, but the priest that trained him was a Pharisee, Gamaliel, who also was instrumental in writing the Talmud, because it even states in the Talmud that when he died, the glory of the law went with him. In the Talmud. So it shut off when Gamaliel died. The great Lord Gamaliel. Well, here now, read this again. Teutonic order. You could be a German by belonging to this. A house of the Hospitalators of St. Mary of the Teutons, religious order. Teutons, religious order. Important in East Europe in the late Middle Ages, founded in 1189 to nurse the sick in Palestine. You get that? Nurse the sick in Palestine during the Third Crusade. It was militarized in 1198 and given land in Jerusalem and Germany. Do you know that the fight today, the struggle today with the Pope and the people that own Israel the Pope owns, the Vatican owns a lot of Israel because it was given to them thousands of years ago. I mean, hundreds of years ago, and this was part of it. But what they're doing today, the group that has control of Israel, they're saying, we want this tax. We want tax. You got to pay your taxes here, or we'll possess your land. So the Pope don't like this. The Vatican doesn't like this, and this is what the big squabble is about at this time. The Vatican owns this land because they've had it throughout the centuries. It was given to them in Jerusalem and Germany. It was militarized in 1198 and given land in Jerusalem and Germany. It transferred its base of operation in East Europe to the 13th century, gaining control of Prussia, that's Persia, by 1283, and making Marienburg the center of a military principality in 1309 to 1525. The order extended its influence until defeated by the Battle of Tanderberg in 1410. Well, you know the rest of the history now of how Germany was defeated after that, and then became very separated. Italy, the people, most Italians are descended from people who have lived in Italy for a long time. Many of them are short and have olive skin and dark eyes. There is no such thing as an Italian race, for many peoples have poured over the Alps. We don't know where they came from. They just came down the mountain one day, or across the Mediterranean Sea and into Italy. Tribes from northern Europe came to Italy from the 7 to the 900s. 7 to 900s. Well, of course, we know they were before that, because the Scripture gives us reference that Italy was actually owned by the Pharisees. They gave orders from there to send out dispatches or crusades to hunt the people, track them down. All of those who would not obey the orders of the Pharisees, that they called Pharisees at that time. And Paul, the Apostle Shaul was one of them. And of course they had also the Roman soldiers that went out, of which he was one. This was before now. This can't be after AD. This was before, because the same groups persecuted the prophets. And Yahshua said, you are the children of those who persecuted the prophets. Then Stephen said, which of the prophets have you not persecuted? And Shaul was standing there at the time, a Roman soldier, when this was said, and the clothes of Stephen were thrown at his feet. A Roman soldier who was a Pharisee. So the Pharisees dated back before Jeremiah, and I would say that this was where Rome was doing its most gaining in its army and in the grounds, and where the Catholic Church was making its hideout or separation to the 7 hills of Rome. Now, you know, this is a mystery now. You know, it's supposed to be by a she-wolf and two twins that their mother discarded from Pluto, of course. This is a totally different race. This is the things that's painted in your mind by the encyclopedias. No, it was formed by the Pharisees. They had control over the Roman soldiers. In fact, the Roman soldiers went to them for decisions, and they gave them their orders. You go do this. before Jerusalem was destroyed, before the temple was destroyed, they already had their minds made up. Only Judah remained anyway, and Judah was, of course, Yahweh was ready to allow them to go because he had already prophesied it by Isaiah and Jeremiah that they would be taken out too. But before that, the Crusades, they would take the Israelites out of Israel, take them to Babylon by order of Rome. And the Roman soldiers were the ones that took them there and held them captive and taught them new lessons and so forth. And when the time came for them to destroy the temple, before this ever came to pass, they sent in Abraham's children, descendants of Abraham. And history says they had a right to go to the feast. They let them in to keep the feast. Well, they went to that last feast and they stayed. And they murdered, and they murdered, and they murdered. And they stole, and there was thousands of them. And history says by the time that the Roman soldiers decided to go in and take the temple and destroy it, they already had the artifacts and everything taken out of the temple. They said, if you remember, the history says that Titus didn't really intend to burn the temple. Well, he had everything out of it, so why didn't he intend to burn it? This was a trick of the Roman army that also did several other nations the same way, several other cities who rebelled against them. Well, Judah did rebel. And they went in and they destroyed it, and they took the artifacts to Rome, Titus did, which proves that it was existing and had a great foundation, a great organization before that ever took place, before the temple was ever destroyed. Sorry I went over. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next speaker. I love you.